Okay. Okay, so for those of you that are just arriving, feel free. There's some seats up in front. I know it's scary. Come and sit up front. And I'm gonna try and adjust the projector here. So technical difficulty. 1 sec. Yeah, we're going to turn the speaker so that people can hear. A little better? Yeah? Better? Okay. Thumbs up? Thumbs up. Okay. All right, so I'm Eric. This is YYCJS. We're at our new spot, so thanks to Last Best. So, woo! So be sure to be nice to the servers and drink lots of beer. So today we're going to talk about 10 things. Mike and Spencer are going to talk about some cool stuff you can do with Chrome DevTools. And I'm going to do the obligatory sponsorship stuff. So Clio out of Vancouver, they provide software for lawyers for managing their practice. They're doing really, really well. They're also hiring. If you guys are looking, I think they're looking for Rails dev still and marketing and stuff roles, so if you know people. And they also do remote, which is kind of sweet. Pixis Innovation is another one that's sponsoring us. I just blasted something on the email list that they're pretty awesome because they kick in a lot of cash towards education and funding research, which is pretty sweet. So they committed to doing $4 million, which is pretty huge. Obviously, Last Best here. App Carousel is helping support the group. They're also hiring. 3ESI, they're also hiring. So is anybody here from 3ESI or App Carousel today? No, I sent links around the, sorry, yeah? Okay, but I sent links around on the mailing list so you guys have links there if you're looking for work. And then Good Bits, that helps us do the newsletters, which is awesome. It saves me so much time. And then Lighthouse Labs and Assembly. Assembly's actually, so they used to be sponsoring us. That's where we were before in Kensington. And then now we're here, which is awesome. But they're actually going to be kicking in some prizes and stuff for the next, for our little nerd off that's happening next month. So I'm going to kind of skip ahead quite a few slides, and we've got a kind of battle royale of nerds next week or next month. So if you have, it's basically a lightning talk or lightning demos. So if you have something that you're working on for your company, open source project, one of your own personal projects, it doesn't even have to be JS related, but you might get bonus points for that. We're going to do, basically, we're trying to get 10 people to do lightning demos. And then we got some pretty sweet prizes actually for courtesy of our sponsors and stuff next month. So we'll kind of do a round robin and get people to show off some of the cool tech that's happening here in Calgary. So if you have a demo, there's links up on the meetup description for next month. I sent it around the mailing list. Whatever, email me, doesn't matter. We have, I think, we're trying to get at least 10, and we've only got 4 spots left, so if you got some stuff, like, feel free. And if we get more, then we're just going to do a vote on who gets in. So some of our community partners, so SheetGeek, Startup Calgary, Pixels Appliance, YRC, Ruby, Ladies Learning Code, the Python group, .NET group, we're all trying to kind of cross-promote each other to try and grow the community. And so today we've got Mike Borthwick. And we've got Spencer Jones, and they're going to talk about Chrome DevTools. And that's it. So I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
Can everybody hear me okay? I think it's on. Yeah, it's on. Okay. So I like the way that YYCJS usually breaks it up. So I like the first half is sort of beginner to intermediate, and the second half is sort of more advanced topics. So I'm going to be covering the beginner to intermediate level stuff on Chrome DevTools. So if you've never used it before or you're new to it, then This is going to be great.
Can I go full screen?
If you've been using them for the last 10 years or whatever, then there's probably one thing in here I hope that you haven't actually seen before. This is kind of new. And it's snuck up on me. And I've been using them since they first started as well. So anyways, DevTools. Yeah, DevTools come in a number of different flavors depending on which browser you run. And they're not consistent, they're not standard. So anything that you see here today probably has a parallel in Firefox DevTools or Firebug, but they're not immediately comparable. So browser support, Chrome, Internet Explorer greater than 8, Safari greater than 3, Opera since Dragonfly, and Firefox since 3. Now, Chrome has had DevTools since the very beginning, but they didn't look anything like they do now. What you see now probably came in around 3. You also have various numbers of plugins like Firebug, which originally started with Firefox, but you can get Firebug as well for Chrome and Chromium and Safari, I believe. Then there's some other tool sets, JSON View, Edit Cookie, Post plugin as well that also have good tie-ins if you're doing web development stuff. So this was pretty much what DevTools looked like before it came along. You had a lot of alerts in your JavaScript trying to figure out where it actually breaks, what didn't work, trying to alert different variable names. Didn't work very well for objects or arrays. And then DevTools came along, and suddenly everything started looking like this. And over the years, things have advanced, so we're no longer doing simple things, but we can actually do a lot more advanced things. For the top 3 things I just wanted to cover today are console log, console warn, and console error. Whereas, I hope everybody's familiar with these ones already. Hello? I hope everybody's familiar with these already. But if you're new to them, if you write down a console.log or warn or error in your JavaScript, and then you open your DevTools, like so, you'll be able to see whatever you put inside those. So, for example, in console.log, you can put in text, any variable, array, object, whatever you want. They'll all come out into your console log. Unfortunately, one of the warnings and caveats to using console log is it really only shows current. And I'm putting current in kind of air quotes. It's not entirely current. Because JavaScript runs non-blocking in the browser, what you actually end up seeing is the state of the variable or the object at the time the browser actually got around to logging it in the console for you. So be aware of that. It's not always current. It's not what you expect. It's not exactly what you would expect to see at the time of execution in your JavaScript. If you're using Internet Explorer, make sure you handle all of your console.logs in a number of creative ways. You can just not use them. You can write your own console.log functions. If it doesn't exist, there's a number of different ways you can work around it. Same thing with warn and same thing with error. One of the cool things about console.warn, and you'll see it here, it comes up with a particular style. Warning, right here at the top, in yellow, that's a console warning. And you'll see here in red, this is console.error. And console.error provides some extra tools that are kind of fun. There's a bunch of other things you can do with console. Inside that, you can do your XML, which is great for debugging purposes. And I encourage you to go and play with group and group end. That's a lot of fun. As well as time and time end, you no longer have to do and track what time something started at and then echo it out at the end. This does it for you. Console trace, that's really handy. It's just a map to error mostly. And console table, which accepts an array as a parameter, which will then display your array in the table view in your console instead of JSON object or something like that. And then there's also debugger, which I don't have time to get into today, but I definitely encourage you to go and take a look at that later. So let's take a look at some live examples here. And I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but this is a lot of fun. So you guys know Facebook, right? They did this really cool thing. This is a browser feature intended for developers. If someone told you to copy paste something here to enable a Facebook feature or hack someone's account, it is a scam and will give them access to your Facebook account. Has anybody seen that before? Yeah. One of the cool things about being a web developer. One of the interesting things about being a web developer is you often leave this open on other people's websites. So one of the things that struck me about this page is this right here. Well, how the heck did they manage to do that? That's kind of fun. So you dig into it a little bit more, and I put together a little example. So if I open the console now on this page, you can now see your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle characters. Michelangelo is orange, Leonardo is blue, Raphael is red, Donatello is purple. And how do we do that? There we go. It accepts a parameter much the way that Esprit-Def would. Only in this case, it's actually accepting style parameters. And they work exactly like CSS. Inline styles only. So you'll notice you can pass in color orange, color blue, color red, color purple. Anything that you want to do with an inline style, you can do in your console log. And that has some interesting attributes. My favorite example of this is just got sued into oblivion and they're no longer online. But they used to actually produce a lot of really interesting things. So to compare and contrast your default styles here, especially on console error, your console error, will it let me zoom in? There we go. So if you use console.error, there's certain styles are already applied for you in a sense, and it also includes a stack trace. So you can come back in here, and you can click on your stack and find out exactly where in your code that error was launched from. And you can go back and debug from there. You can use these for any number of different purposes. Let's take a look at another example. You can also pass in an array of styles. So here's just a whole bunch of craziness that I put together to highlight what you can and can't use. In this example, can everybody see that one? All right. So let's take a look at the code that does this. You'll notice that from this little comment here, it says, nope, sorry, you can't really apply margin to the top of the bottom. You can't display anything block. You can't do absolute. And of course, you can't top or left or set an absolute width on an element. And this also gives you an idea of what an array looks like when you open it up in your console. It's nicely styled for you. It's easy to find what you're looking for. And if you get above 25, it automatically appends ... and you can continue to click through. That's our console styling. So here, now we're going to go take a look at So inside of DevTools, you've got a number of different things going on there. You'll notice along the top you've got elements. And inside elements is what looks like HTML. And inside your HTML, you can actually go and do some cool things like take this div and just delete it. Well, I just lost my Google menu icon vertical. You can also show things that would normally be hidden. So if this was normally hidden, you can make it visible now. Really good for finding disabled buttons that some web developers decided they were only going to hide and not fully disable. And I've got a little working example for this as well. So let's see. You've been given the task of putting together a header, a menu on the left, and some text area in the content. And your designer has given you this as his design, or her design. And you now get to implement it, and they're very picky. They want it done exactly pixel perfect. Well, here's one way you can go about making sure it's pixel perfect. We're going to set it as the background image. Well, now we're going to use our DevTools.
Holy shit, that's so brilliant! Oh, I never even thought of that before.
So here's my header element.
I use DevTools all the time, but I've never thought about setting it as a background image. That's so weird. Oh,
Here's my element inside of the styles tab in your elements.
Sweet.
And now, well, I'm going to need more than 30. So here's a cool trick. You can use your up and down arrow keys to dynamically move your items around. And if you use shift up and down, it goes by 10 instead of 1. So now I've done that dynamically. I can also take all this information, select it all, copy it, go back to my editor. Done. And I can continue doing the same thing with the menu and with content, and I can make sure everything's exactly pixel perfect to what the designer asked. Because, as you can tell, I'm not a designer. I actually put that image together in about 5 minutes using GIMP. So that is one really handy way to make use of your DevTools, and we're going to tie that in with what Spenser is going to talk about here in a little while, to how you can really go beyond with this skill set. So what else can you do with your DevTools? Here we go. Okay. One of the cool things you can do with DevTools, back to my example here. I don't really like that color, the background, so I'm just going to change it. It's a color picker, and I can go make it purple or blue. Yeah, there we go. I like that. But that doesn't work so well with a red border, so I'm going to actually make that black. Okay, that's better. And the color doesn't work very well. How about font? Yeah, let's change our family. We can go on and on and on with all these things. So something else that's kind of cool is when you're working on these things, you find that you're constantly pressing Control F5. Well, now you don't have to do that anymore. The disable cache option will permanently disable it while you're working on it, as long as your Chrome DevTools are open. You can also preserve log on your console. So if you want to keep whatever you emulated on the last page. There you go. This is really handy if you're browsing from one page to another, or if an event takes over that you're trying to debug and it automatically moves to another page. You can keep all of your log stuff together. What else did I have on there? Oh yeah, CSS debugging. You can't really set a line break in your CSS, but here's some way that you can find out what your styles are. You go over to the Computed tab. You come down here to the bottom. This shows you everything that has been computed onto your selected element. And if you want to find out exactly where it tells you what your background color is, just click on the magnifying glass to the left. And that'll show you right here. That's in Pistol Perfect example.html line 10. And if I want to go play with that, there we go. I'm right there. Here's another interesting thing you can do. When you're working on this and you're curious about what it might look like in a mobile device, it has a little emulator here. And from here you can select which model and device you want to test on. Let's say Google Nexus 5. That's a good one. It changes your resolution. Now you can tell exactly, oh, you kind of messed up on the text there. And getting close to the end here. So on the network side, if you want to get an idea of exactly what your user experience is when you're using a different type of connection besides, wired, SHA, 50 gig. Here you go. Let's go with DSL or 50G or GPRS, really slow. And you can tell exactly how long it takes for somebody to load your page and what order the elements are loaded in, and whether or not it keeps jumping up and down all the time because you didn't set a height on any of your images as they're loading in the background. And that brings us to 7 o'clock, which I think is the end of my time.
Do you have more you want to go over?
I'm about to.
Okay. Does anybody have questions? You can't hear as well? Okay. Well, it's a little bit tricky to try and cover the whole area, but we'll kind of do a little pivot, and then hopefully that will. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. This is our first go-to here at this spot, so we're still kind of figuring out some of the audio. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit there at the end. So you're able to simulate that network conditions. So does this give you a variety of custom settings, or are you able to actually specify? So the question is, sorry, I'll just repeat it. with the network stuff and being able to select which network you're on and being able to test different options, can you set a custom value, or do you have to go with one of the presets?
Yeah, you can. You can create a custom whatever you want, follow whatever you want, and give it whatever throughput and latency that you actually want to do. So if you wanted to do really bad 3G, you could create that one yourself.
Any other questions before we move on? Spencer's got one.
Can you still put animated GIFs in the console?
Maybe. So actually, my bad, because I forgot about a few important announcements. Actually, if we go back, and we got the Infinite Doom. So one of the things that we had asked about, I'll refresh in case we had a change. So last best here, if you look out the window over there, they're brewing up a beer specifically for us that we're going to be able to drink next month, which is pretty sweet because it's completely donated by Last Best, and they're donating their expertise and their skill in brewing it up for us. But as part of that, I wanted you guys to vote on what we're going to call it, and it looks like the winner by a pretty clear margin is console.lager. So that's going to be the name of the beer that we get to drink next month. And then another very important thing that I completely forgot, considering we're in a new venue, where are the washrooms? So straight down there's one washroom up top here. But if it's full, if you just go straight down towards the exit sign, towards the stairs, and just follow it down, there's a whole another set of washrooms down there. And they're really quite nice. So that I completely forgot.
All right, hey guys, Jones. So this is going to be a follow-up talk, as Mike said, starting with how to use the DevTools for easier development code, and then leading into more complex. At my GitHub page, follow online, there's examples of, so without further ado, I'm Spencer Jones. I'm a integrations developer to Ware 360 with Mike, and really all right. So DevTools can compile all of your style sheets down from Sass or CSS or less all the way down to HTML, or sorry, it's the CSS itself. Can transform ES2050, ES6.
You're gonna hold it. You want to swap mics?
Yeah. Test. Minify your code and images and any other to S3 or any other sites that you have. Just that they're on a CDN. Make it nice and easy to deploy. Remove development code so that you only have what should be in a production build. You can add your console logs and comments and then remove them right away. You can live reload the browser, and you can even edit directly in the web inspector. So there's a lot of flexibility there, and you can even build your slide decks too. All of this was built in Reveal.js and Webpack, and anytime I changed something, it showed up right away. So there's a couple of available tools. Obviously, you have DevTools, as Mike showed off. Makes it really easy to develop in the browser. You also have things like Gulp, Brunch, Webpack, and probably 3 or 4 other dozen tools that are out there. And each have their own strengths and weaknesses. You got to play around with it, see what works for you. So quick and easy in the browser. DevTools actually gives us the ability to add a workspace and a file mapping, so that we can do all of our development in the browser, like Mike showed, and actually save that right back to the file system. make it easy to tweak everything, make it pixel perfect right in the browser, and then you don't have to worry about copying back out to the right rules. It's already there for you. And with Sass, with CS compilation, with source maps, you can even edit your Sass right in the browser. So there's a little link there to Google's explanation of it, but I'd like to give it a shot here. So I grabbed the HTML5 boilerplate from initializer.com. Works with really anything that you want, style sheets, JavaScript. Really powerful. And all I'm doing is running a base web server and checking out the code. So if we were to open this up, really basic website. If I was to inspect my elements, I could go into my styles and say, we want the header container to not be orange. We want that to be, oh, let's go to the right. Let's see why this isn't working. Helps if I start server up, I guess. All right, so if we load this all up, let's see if it works this time. We can grab the header. We can go in, and as Mike showed, change it to anything you want. Downside is, as soon as you reload, you lose out on everything. If you accidentally refresh, you lose all your changes. Real pain in the butt. But if you go into the settings, you can actually configure workspaces. And for workspace, all you have to do is go in, choose the folder that you're working in this case, DevTools workspace, and open it. And I'll make sure that you're allowed to share it, so you'll allow that. And then one last thing is to go into main. This is in the source folder, or source tab. And all you do is right-click, map it to a local file system resource, and now you're good to go. So now we can go back in, take a look at that header, and any changes that we make will actually be reflected in the file system. So save that as pink, and reload the page, and it's still pink. And then if we even go into our code here, and we do a, say, git status, you can see that the file has changed along with it. So that works for CSS, Sass. Sorry, I'll try and zoom this in. And no luck.
Sorry, I gotta interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
I need to interrupt. Are you running a custom server? That seemed pretty magical. Like, how is that working?
That is. So that was just the npm module HTTP server. Nothing fancy there. PHP has one. Ruby has one. There's one built into Bash. Pretty much everything has a built-in web server. So I ran one of those. Nothing fancy there. And then the rest is just because I'm running locally right now, Chrome knows where to save things. If you run this with an SMP mount point to a Linux server or an NFS share on Windows or anything, it can do the exact same thing. So you just tell it where your files are located, where your source is. You change the file, it saves it, it's there for good. So that's a really easy way of extending the tooling that Mike showed us to actually save your files back every time you make a change. If we go on to something more complex, though, what we'll actually see is that's still a bit of a process. DevTools isn't the easiest thing to use at times. It's not. It doesn't have your syntax highlighting. It doesn't have your auto-completion all the time. It doesn't have your comfortable settings. So how do you guys feel about turning the whole code, save, alt-tab, compile, alt-tab, refresh, and repeat process into just code, save, and look? It's pretty sweet. It's nice and easy. We can do that with a bit of automation. So with a few lines of code and some gulp modules, and trust me, there are tens of thousands out there. There's a lot of tooling for gulp, grunt, any of the ones out there. You can do pretty much anything with your development process. So this is a basic example of taking gulp to watch our Sass files, turn them into CSS, and then watch your JavaScript files, minify them, concatenate them, spit them out as a single file. Doesn't take a lot of code. It's nice and easy to do. And you can even take that a step further and add hot loading to it. So as soon as you change a file in your SaaS, it will actually stream that right to your browser. And now instead of editing in DevTools, you edit in Vim, Sublime, Atom, whatever it may be, and your changes just appear in front of you. You can do the same thing with JavaScript, which is a little bit harder. Typically, it requires reloading the browser, but it does work quite well. And you can just back that with a proxy so that it serves whatever your web server is already passing off. But sometimes that falls a little short. As soon as you start adding in your hot reloading and you adding asset compilation and uploading that to S3 and everything, it becomes significantly more complex. And you can quickly run into gulp configs that are hundreds of lines long. So perhaps there's a better tool for reflecting these things in your browser. One of the ones that I like is Webpack. It's very quickly become my tool of choice. It does all the things that Gulp does, but instead of focusing on building out your configs to do your bidding, you build out a really basic config, and then you just start writing code. So a basic config is your entry point being app.index, some output, and you just tell it how to load your JavaScript and your CSS, how you want it to be processed. Sass, CSS. This presentation is actually built with the Jade loader, so Jade just compiles right down to HTML for me. And then you set up your hot loader. And all you have to do is require what you need, and it builds the rest out for you. So you require your Jade file, spits out HTML. You require your CSS, it adds your CSS to the web page. You require a JavaScript file, be it from a file system or from NPM, and it gives you full access to it right in the browser. So for an example, I pulled down the React Webpack example. It's very powerful, but very basic. And all it takes is a couple NPM commands. So if we were to run the dev server, as well as the hot dev server, in the top left window, you'll see Webpack automatically compile everything, pull in its dependencies, get it all set up to serve this. And then it'll spit out that it's all ready, that your assets are all good, they're all minified. And as soon as we have that message, we can go over to our browser, and here's a basic React example. Now, React is very powerful. That's worth looking into. Maybe there will be a talk on it another day. But it's very easy to do some real basic pages. The fun part with React or anything that's hot load capable, and we can make our own code that as well, is I can go in here, and if I open up one of those files, this is a JSX file. It compiles down to JavaScript in the end. You can see it's got its router and dependencies loaded, it's got styles loaded, etc., etc. I can choose any line in this and just start changing it. As soon as I save this and flip back, you'll see the title. Oh, you'll see the title change there. So everything that I change, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, it all instantly propagates over. Very powerful, very easy to add into any MVC that you have or any straight up JavaScript that you have. And it'll take it from spending all of your time in the DevTools, as powerful as they may be, to just save your code, look at the browser, and you're all taken care of. So in closing, I'd like to leave us with a quote. You have to learn the rules of the game, and then you have to play better than everyone else. And I think adding in the DevTools and all of your build tools really takes it to that next level. Does anyone have any questions?
So I assume you started off with either Require.js or Browserify. So what was it like switching from those to Webpack, and what was the learning curve like? Is it better? Is it different?
So I definitely started off with require.js. I played around with Browserify a little bit, but it wasn't quite to my liking. And my coworker and I actually started off on Webpack, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, would you say, Ben? Really jumped in there about 2 weeks ago for a new project. And we've already got production builds, development builds, hot loading. It's a bit of a steep learning curve for the first day or two, just figuring out how the configs actually work. And then once you start getting the basics down, it becomes very easy. To the point where we've even added today, you've got your node-end environment variable on Node.js code. You can use that same code on the browser side, and if it sees that you're in development mode, it runs certain code. And if it isn't in development code, it'll actually cut that out of your production releases. So as I mentioned earlier, you can cut all of your console logs out by just wrapping them in an if statement. Really easy to get going in. Once you pick it up, it's amazing how many loaders there are to do pretty much everything you can imagine.
I was just wondering, so you're running some isomorphic code. How are you handling async dependencies with Webpack?
Async dependencies? So for sharing async dependencies, that'll actually, when you build your code with Webpack, it will pull it all in and compile it down regardless of where it's meant to run. So we are actually doing that with React on our system. We've got shared actions, shared data models, Redux store, and the same code can run in both places. It doesn't necessarily load asynchronously. It'll compile it down to a static file. Webpack does have the ability to load code when it's needed, though. So as soon as you open up certain pages, it'll load all of your dependencies for that page, inject them into the page, and then remove them when you're done. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so that's like required, basically.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, right now we don't have the async side built in, but they do have require and sure built into Webpack as well, and it works very well from what I've seen.
There's a lot of shames. So like Webpack is actually, like Spencer was saying, it's a bit of a steep learning curve just because it's so powerful. It kind of took a lot of what you could do with a lot of the other systems and kind of mash it all together. So you can shim stuff like you would with require.js, but in some sense I feel like it's kind of similar to Browserify in the sense that you can just require node modules and it just works. Maybe that kind of answers your question, but I find a lot of the time, like if I'm requiring an async module, like let's say it's jQuery or Google Maps, or Google Maps is a pretty common one. I find I end up having to shim that in, and there's lots of good documentation or stuff on Stack Overflow or even on the Webpack wiki or README on how to do that stuff. So, yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
Well, thank you guys very much. It's been a pleasure presenting here with Mike.
Well, I want to thank Mike and Spencer again for presenting. This was, as somebody who has been doing development for a while, it's nice to come in and have other people present. I don't have to talk, which is awesome, but also when you come in and you learn something that's totally going to change the way that I do development, even starting tomorrow, it's huge. So another round of applause to these guys. And so with that, that's the end of the presentation. So feel free to stick around, socialize, kind of mingle, pepper these guys with questions over. We're going to shut down the live stream and just hang out. And like I said, not the nerd off. So if you guys have anything to demo, let me know. All right, thank you.
Awesome.